right now. Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
All right, thanks for sticking around for the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I'm Rich Walsh. I'll be joined by Chris Mueller in a matter of moments. Over to 93.7 The Fan Cam and talk about anything you want tonight. 412-575-2600 is the number. We can start with Pitt right now, losing by 15. This will be their fourth straight loss. They were just dominating the first half, down by 16. I guess made up a point in the second half, midway through the second half right now, and it's 58-43. You know, what is going on with Pitt? 4 straight, 2 straight on the road. They had their chances against North Carolina. Davis is pretty good. He beat them in that game. Also, you know, made mistakes, but in this first half, you know, a bunch of turnovers, losing in the paint. I mean, they need to find a big man. I think that's what we can point to right now.
Damian Dunn being done for the year again and for having missed so much time early in the year certainly didn't help. I think he was supposed to bring in the bulk of the scoring that Carrington going to the NBA lost, even though he's a very different kind of player, and he had pedigree coming from Houston, of course, where they are perennially one of the best teams in the country now. But the fact of the matter is here, Rich, this team has never really gelled, partly due to injury, and yes, when you're 2 of your 3 tallest players, and I hate to say this, but it just is what I think of when I'm watching the game. The Diaz-Graham twins, they remind me of like at car dealerships, Rich. You ever see those like big plastic things that flap in the wind?
That's hilarious, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? I mean, that's what I think about when I watch the Diaz-Graham brothers playing out there and trying to bang down low, even like with guys who are shorter than them who are a lot stockier. You know, they're giving up, you know, a lot of weight. And when you're that tall, that effect becomes even magnified. So they have really Cam Corrin and nobody else down low, and they are a really imbalanced team as a result. And they're going to lose this game, and their season is essentially circling the drain. I think Pitt fans are aware of that. They'd have to win out and then make serious noise in the ACC tournament, and I'm not even sure at that point, Rich, if it would be enough. This is then shaping up to be very much a lost season for Jeff Capel, one that I think most people, and I would include myself in this kind of group or this category of person, I thought this was going to be a tournament team. Yeah. I liked what he had brought in. I thought it was going to be enough. It clearly hasn't been, and now he's going to have to do what every college coach does, go back to the drawing board and, like you just said, figure out, A, where the roster went wrong, and B, since most of us know it's big men or lack thereof, find some in the portal. It's not easy. You know, you'd love to believe that a guy like Capel with his connections can work the portal, but players have to want to come here. And I also would say you've probably got to find a place for the Diaz-Graham brothers to go. I don't think they can be on this roster next year when the season starts.
Yeah, I mean, they got the height, but you saw they were getting balls ripped out of their hands at North Carolina. You know, they're just not strong enough. They're not. I mean, they're big enough, but they're just not.
They're not true big men, though.
Yes,
they're not true big men. Like they're stretch 4 types. I mean, you remember the great NBA player and, of course, excellent college player, Tayshaun Prince. Like, that guy was super skinny, but he was angular, and he was an excellent defender, and he wasn't quite so tall as to be easily knocked off the ball. He was stronger than he looked. I mean, these guys, if Guillermo Diaz-Graham is not hitting threes for you at about a 40% clip, and I think at last check he was shooting about 27% on the season, he's just not really going to provide a whole lot of value. I don't think either guy is dogging it out there, to be very clear. I just think they're very limited in what they're able to accomplish, and that stinks to say about 6'11 guys who are coming from overseas. Like, you would hope that's a gold mine. Oh my God, these guys are going to develop. It really just has not happened for either one of them in any significant way.
You know, you're bringing up names here, and it makes me think of other thin guys, like a Rasheed Wallace. He was a guy from Pennsylvania. He was pretty thin in college, right? And look how dominant he was.
He was, I don't know if I would call him thin. He was a scary, intense dude in college who's also, like, let's not disrespect Rasheed Wallace here.
I'm not trying to disrespect him. He's in a different category, you know.
No. But I'm saying disrespect him in terms of talent. Like, Rasheed Wallace was a lottery pick talent. I mean, neither Diaz-Graham brother is obviously even close to that. They just remind me of players that you hope in college can find ways around their limitations, and they can't. I mean, what you're really looking for in terms of a college big man is somebody who's 6'9", 6'10", 220, 230. I mean, what are the Diaz-Graham brothers, 6'11", and are they 210, 205? I mean, they're giving up, maybe not even. Like, when you're giving up 35, 40 pounds to some of these bigs, I don't care. Being tall is a disadvantage at that point, Rich. I mean, you're big tree fall hard at that point.
Even DeJuan Blair, he didn't have the height, but he had the wingspan.
DeJuan Blair would have been snapping these guys over his knees like baseball bats for Bo Jackson. That's what DeJuan Blair would have been doing. I mean, he threw Hasheem Thabeet around like a rag doll, and Thabeet was every bit of 7'3", 260.
Yeah, it all starts. I remember Jeff Capel when he was announced as the head coach. He said it all started with the point guard. I mean, they've been getting guards for sure. There's no question about it, but they can't recruit someone big underneath. I don't know what the problem is.
I think it's a roster construction thing, and in the portal, you can't guarantee it. I'm sure Jeff Capel brought the Diaz-Grahams in thinking these guys are both going to, A, put on a little bit of weight, put on some muscle. Like, I think even 10 pounds of muscle for each player would make a major difference. And then it's pretty obvious, I think, that they felt at Pitt that both of these guys would develop year over year. And I just think that they are both, especially Guillermo, who's supposed to be the better one of the two, they're just both the exact same player that they were coming into the program. I mean, that's just, they didn't develop.
No.
And so I don't know. There's not a lot you can do about that unless you can find a way to make sure they're not on your roster and you can bring in guys who replace them who are better.
All right, don't forget about our live question of the night. You can scan the QR code right there. Which wide receiver do you want to see come to the Steelers? Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin. I know who I want. You can see the percentages right now. We'll see how it ends up at the end of the show. And we're taking your phone calls too tonight. 412-575-2600. Back in a couple minutes. All right, welcome back to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. This is our GMC Tweet of the Night. This is from Mark Caboli. You see him sometimes on this show, also on the #1 Concord Sports Showdown on Sunday. Works for the Pat McAfee Show. He said arguably the two best up-and-coming coaches on the Steelers staff, Aaron Curry, Grady Brown, didn't have their contracts renewed. Is that by their choice or the team's choice? And, you know, that's a good question, Chris. Grady Brown was just interviewing for the Falcons defensive coordinator. And I remember when he was at the Senior Bowl, they were talking about he was one of the up-and-coming coaches. Same with Aaron Curry. Aaron Curry jetted to the Jets, no pun intended, for a similar job. What do you think's going on here?
Good question. I don't know for sure, obviously. I think we'd all love to know who makes what decision there, the person or the team. In Aaron Curry's case, I think it's just particularly confounding that he goes over to the Jets in what amounts to a lateral move. I guess I would surmise that one might just be they didn't want his contract picked back up. Grady Brown's more confusing because I know we've heard, I think you've probably heard the same things, Richie. He had at least one defensive coordinator interview this offseason. And so did he just want to be done and he thinks bigger things are ahead? I know their secondary clearly had issues. You'd have to put a lot of that back on him, communication, things like that. But it's, again, a troubling sign that a young up-and-coming coach suddenly just isn't here anymore, and now they're hiring somebody who was with the Raiders? Yes, because if there's any franchise you want to be hiring your next coach from to replace somebody that's gone, either by your decision or theirs, it's that noted exemplary franchise, the one that defines consistency and excellence, the Vegas Raiders.
Gerald Alexander, he was with the Steelers a couple years ago as an assistant defensive backs coach. All right, so
they could have had Jason Alexander from Seinfeld join the staff, and it might have been about as impactful.
So what do you think about this question? We'll read it here. Scan your QR code out there. Which wide receiver would you want to see come to the Steelers? Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin. I mean, we could even put Devontae Adams in that category because he's probably going to decline those last 2 years and become a free agent. There are other guys out there. One guy that intrigues me, I think T. Higgins. Why would he want to come here? I think he's going to command too much money. Chris Godwin is interesting to me. That's the one guy that I would want to take a chance on. Especially, I think you can get him for a good price right now because he has to prove it because of his injury.
Watching this thing in the bottom of my screen, Richie, is like watching a stock ticker to see the percentages keep changing. I see Kupp at 25. I see Deebo at 10. I assume Higgins is carrying the day here because I can't see the other two. just the way I'm set up. So I'm assuming T. Higgins is getting the most
50%.
vote percentage.
50%,
okay,
and Godwin's at 14%.
Higgins should be getting T. Higgins should be getting like 90% of this vote. Cooper Kupp, absolutely not. He's on a team that routinely schemes him open. He does not have a first step that beats anybody anymore. He's with a better quarterback and a better scheme there. If they want to move on from him, that should be a warning shot to everybody else, especially teams like the Steelers. Deebo Samuel is much the same in terms of they scheme him open too. They have special things, unique features of that San Francisco offense. I'm sure here Arthur Smith would see him as Cordero Patterson, but way better.
Yeah.
Except Deebo Samuel really had one elite year, 2021. He gets banged up a lot. He doesn't finish games a lot because how physically he plays. I'm sure he'd be a fan favorite. Don't love that. Godwin's all right. I mean, Godwin's somebody that I think is still a productive player in this league, can do a lot of different things well. T. Higgins, though, is the obvious best one of the bunch, but I'm still not convinced that the Bengals are going to let him go here. I just don't think that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd want to see T. Higgins here, too. I know we talked a little bit about it, but, you know, I don't know if the Steelers are going to go out and pay that for him if he's even available, nor would I think Higgins would want to come here in this offense. Godwin would be okay with Pickens if Pickens is still around, and then maybe they would draft someone, and then you have Roman Wilson. That might be a good receiving core.
Richie, this is grim, man. Let's just cut to the chase. This is grim. We're talking about T. Higgins and saying, why on earth would a Bengals player want to come to the Steelers? How times have changed in the last several years.
The Steelers don't even know who their quarterback is yet either. That's maybe the bigger issue.
I know. That's why I'm saying it's Richie. I know. That's why I'm saying it's grim. I mean, like we get all these things in our business. Peek behind the curtain here. People like Andrew and I don't know. Maybe you get them too. You're on these mailing lists from all these betting houses that give us, hey, who's got the best odds to be the landing spot for so and so, and it's always like a veteran player that's on the outs with his current team. Word to the wise, you never want your team to be near the top of the odds because that usually means your team stinks. The Steelers, who's Aaron Rodgers' next team? Steelers, even money. Who's Devontae Adams' next team? Steelers, second biggest favorite. Like, that means you are a team without a rudder, a team without a direction, and a team that has many more needs than I think even its biggest supporters would want to admit, and as many needs as maybe its detractors would acknowledge. So we're in a grim time. I mean, I'm 39, so I've watched this team with some interest since I was since 1992. Excuse me. I would say 98-99 was the only time comparable to this. They have 7-9 and 6-10 seasons back to back.
Yeah.
But even then, that brought about big changes. Tom Donahoe loses his power struggle with Bill Cowher. You bring in Kevin Colbert. In a couple of years, you get Ben Roethlisberger. You win a couple Super Bowls. Like, this feels worse because it feels like organizationally they still don't think that there's a need for a major shakeup.
Yeah, it also feels worse, too, because there's a big question mark at quarterback. I don't like any of the quarterbacks in this year's draft. I don't like any of the free agents. I don't want to trade for anyone. There's nobody out there. It doesn't seem like there's an answer right now, other than maybe Justin Fields. Play with him, and if he stinks, then you're going to have a good draft pick that you might be able to get a quarterback the next 2 years. That's the way I look at it.
But here's what I would call the bigger problem. I've said this so many times, but I'll reiterate it. Even if that comes to pass, Fields plays, and it just, hey, last chance saloon, man, and it just doesn't work out. Even if they have like a top 3 pick or a top 5 pick, and it's obvious they have access to one of the quarterbacks they would want, why, given the track record we have seen them show as a franchise post-Roethlisberger, and really at the end of Roethlisberger's tenure, would anyone have any faith that the people in charge can A, identify the right guy, and B, develop that guy? There's nothing to suggest that Art Rooney, that Mike Tomlin, or that anybody on that coaching staff can be considered an expert in any of those crucial areas.
All right, let's go to Josiah out in San Antonio. What's up, Josiah?
Hey, Chris. The question on the screen about the receiver, I would like to see them get Cooper Kupp. Anybody. I mean, this team is desperate. And don't forget, when George Pickens got hurt, it was just obvious that this team is starving for another receiver. But I'm thinking the way they think, I don't think they even think that they need a receiver, Rich. I think they're just relaxing. And let me ask you guys this real quick. I heard you guys talking basketball, and I was impressed with you guys' knowledge. Chris and Rich, who's you guys' favorite NBA team?
Well, favorite NBA team? I mean, I grew up in the 90s, right? Like the 80s, 90s, and I was a big Bulls fan and Michael Jordan fan. So If there was any favorite NBA team, I would say Michael Jordan and the Bulls. But, you know, being in Pittsburgh, we follow the Steelers and the Pirates and the Penguins, and Steelers more so. Like, I don't sit there and root for any NBA team. I don't know about you, Chris. I know Bob does.
Well,
Bob
the Cavs
Bob loves NBA.
Yeah, so do I. I love it too. The Cavs are fun and they're great. Like Donovan Mitchell, that's a really fun team. Garland hits that crazy winner from inside half court. To answer Josiah's question, since it's just a lot less depressing than thinking about the Steelers' future, I've always rooted for styles, right? So I love the early 2000s Sacto Kings who were robbed by a fixed Game 6 by David Stern, to the league's eternal shame. That was just one of the most absurd miscarriages of officiating justice. You think people think the Chiefs get all the calls? My God, go back and look at Game 6 of that series. So I love their style of play. I always liked how good fundamentally San Antonio was. Tim Duncan's the best power forward of all time, but I'm always somebody that likes watching like pretty basketball because when it's played at the highest level, I think it's incredibly fun to watch. So right now I would say Cavs, back in the day Kings, and then Spurs and Warriors. I mean, the early Warriors were a ton of fun before they kind of got not fun.
The Magic they were fun to watch too back in the day too.
Well, that was everybody's squad. Penny and Shaq.
Yeah,
By the way, the kids have no idea. Penny Hardaway was ahead of his time. He was. You want to talk about a player who, if he was playing today and had stayed healthy, or even playing back then, you want to talk about an all-time great in the making? Penny Hardaway.
We got to go to break. Back in a couple minutes. All right, welcome back, Chris. You know, I know we were talking about the Steelers in the last break before we end the show. I think when you might see things change with the Steelers is after Mike Tomlin. He has 3 more years left, and then Art Rooney is going to eventually hand over the reins to his son, Danny Rooney. I think maybe that's when you're going to see things change.
Richie, I would just say this quickly. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but why do we have to wait? Right? The Eagles won a Super Bowl with Doug Peterson the minute Jeffrey Lurie felt it was going sideways. Goodbye, Doug. And that's how it should be. You should have an owner who's not afraid to make bold changes and to give power to people he thinks can handle it.
All right, we got to make a change. That's it for us tonight. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Chris. See you tomorrow. See you next week. Well, hopefully we'll see you guys on KDKA News right now.